I need police in the courtroom right now." The words were barely above a whisper, but in a room that quiet, they landed like broken glass. Judge Frank Caprio had just lifted his eyes from the citation when every sound in Providence Municipal Court seemed to stop at once. The scrape of chairs, the cough near the back row. Even the clerk's fingers froze over the keyboard. At the defense table stood a young woman in a cream blazer, phone half hidden behind a leather folder, chin raised like she was daring the room to challenge her. Then the 911 operator's voice came back through the speaker. "Ma'am, what is the emergency?" That was the moment everybody understood what she had done. Not outside the building, not after the hearing, right there, in open court, while the judge was speaking to her. And the expression on her face changed almost instantly because she realized the same thing everyone else did at the same time. There were already officers in the room, there were microphones recording every word, and if that call was false, she had just turned a traffic case into something much worse. What nobody knew yet was that this was never going to stay a traffic case. The phone call was reckless. The regret came fast. But underneath that impulsive little act was something much bigger than embarrassment, bigger than entitlement, bigger than one privileged defendant trying to bully a courtroom, because within the hour, the call would expose a pattern of pressure, back-channel favors, and a level of arrogance so complete she genuinely believed emergency services were just another tool her family could use when ordinary rules stopped bending. If you appreciate stories where power finally meets consequences, stay with me. Because once that call hit the dispatch log, the case stopped being about a citation and started becoming a public lesson in what happens when status collides with a judge who cannot be intimidated. The woman holding the phone was 27-year-old Ava Mercer, daughter of Congressman Daniel Mercer, a four-term representative whose district office sat less than 15 minutes away. She was not in court for anything dramatic on paper, at least not at first. The underlying matter was a speeding citation issued 6 weeks earlier on Broad Street near Gilbert Stewart Middle School. 48 in a 20-mile school zone at 7:41 in the morning. On top of that came an expired registration and failure to produce valid proof of insurance at the stop. Nothing glamorous, just the kind of municipal case most people either resolve quietly or learn from. But Ava Mercer was not most people. By the time her case was called that Tuesday morning, it had already been continued twice. Once because of a scheduling conflict, once because of official obligations. The court file also showed 3 separate calls from an outside office asking whether the matter could be administratively handled. Nobody put the congressman's name in the file itself, but the clerk logged the number. It matched a district office line. That should have been a warning. Instead, Ava came in late, visibly irritated, and carrying herself with the kind of polished contempt that tells you she has spent a long time being rescued from consequences. When Judge Caprio asked the standard opening question, whether she understood the charges, she didn't answer directly. She looked around the courtroom, took in the benches filled with ordinary defendants waiting their turn, and said, "I'm not standing here all morning over a paperwork issue." Caprio did what experienced judges do. He didn't rise to it. He asked again. Then he noticed the phone. Not because he was looking for drama, because he heard the dispatcher. "Ma'am, are you in immediate danger?" The bailiff turned first, the clerk turned second. Caprio leaned forward just enough to see the faint blue light against Ava's hand as she lowered the device toward the table. "Miss Mercer," he said very calmly, "are you calling 911 from this courtroom?" "No," she said too quickly. The operator was still audible. "Ma'am, you said a judge is refusing to let you leave." The room went dead. Ava blinked once, hard. That was the first crack. She had expected the title to do the work for her. Congressman's daughter, important family, important office. She thought one emergency call, one suggestion that she was being unlawfully detained, and the whole room would panic, apologize, or back away. That was the calculation. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, because Judge Caprio did not flinch. He looked at the bailiff and said, "Preserve the record." Then he looked back at Ava Mercer. You are in a public courtroom on the record with court officers present. If you have made a false emergency report, you have made your situation dramatically worse." That line changed the temperature in the room. For the first time, the confidence left her posture. Not all at once, but enough. She tried to pivot, said she felt threatened, said the court was refusing to let her leave, said the whole thing was confusing. But nothing about the scene was confusing. She had been asked a question about a citation. No one had touched her. No one had raised a voice. No one had blocked an exit. The transcript was clean. The cameras were running, and court security had watched the entire thing happen from 10 feet away. The problem was proof, and proof in that room was not on her side. Within minutes, the 911 supervisor confirmed that the call had been logged at 8:33 a.m. as a live emergency request alleging unlawful detention by a judge. That allegation carried consequences of its own. False emergency reports pull officers off real emergencies. In a city system already stretched thin, that is not just disrespectful, it is dangerous. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Because when the city prosecutor asked for a brief recess to review the file in light of the call, someone did what Ava Mercer clearly never expected anyone would do. They started reading. And the deeper they looked, the uglier it got. The clerk produced the call notes tied to her continuances. A court administrator pulled internal emails. Then investigators found the detail that changed everything. A message sent 9 days earlier from a congressional staff aide to a municipal liaison asking whether Ava's matter could be cleaned up before local press seized the docket. It did not order anything directly. Smart people rarely write the blunt version. But the meaning was obvious enough. This was not a young woman panicking in court. This was someone who had lived close enough to power for long enough that she treated the justice system like customer service. If you believe no one is above accountability, stay with me. Because the center of this case was not the speeding ticket. It was the moment the court realized the contempt was structural. Judge Caprio returned to the bench with the kind of silence that usually means he has already made one important decision. He asked Ava a series of precise questions. Had anyone threatened her? No. Had anyone prevented her from exiting before her matter was heard? No. Had she told the dispatcher that a judge was refusing to let her leave? Yes, but in her words, that was the feeling of it. Had she used the emergency system to gain leverage in an active proceeding? No. Then came the exchange that broke the case open. Caprio lifted the printed dispatch transcript and read her own words back to her. "I need police in the courtroom. A judge is refusing to let me leave and escalating the situation." "Miss Mercer, what exactly was escalating?" She stared at him. Nothing came out. He let the silence sit, not for theater, for truth. Finally she said, "I didn't think it would become this." And there it was, not remorse, not yet, just shock that the system had not bent. The prosecutor then placed 2 more items into the record. First, the body camera summary from the original traffic stop, where Ava could be heard telling the officer, "My father knows people in this city." Second, the insurance verification response from the date of the stop showing the policy on the vehicle had lapsed 19 days earlier. So now the picture was complete. The ticket was valid. The court had been pressured. The emergency call was false, and the defendant had a documented pattern of trying to convert family influence into immunity. What happened next changed the entire case. Judge Caprio referred the 911 call for immediate review as a false report, held Ava Mercer in summary contempt for disrupting proceedings, and ordered the court to transmit the administrative communications to the city solicitor's office for investigation into improper contact. He did not rant. He did not grandstand. That made it worse for her. Calm authority always does. Then he said something that landed harder than any outburst could have. Privilege is not a defense. It is often the reason discipline becomes necessary. By noon, word had reached the State House press room. By evening, the story was no longer about Judge Caprio being called on. It was about a congressman's daughter misusing 911 in open court after prior attempts had allegedly been made to soften her case. The congressman's office released a statement saying he had no involvement and expected full respect for judicial process. Two staffers were quietly reassigned within 48 hours. Local radio tore it apart. Former clerks spoke anonymously about the culture of unofficial pressure, and suddenly a minor municipal docket had become a statewide humiliation. Ava Mercer returned 3 weeks later with counsel. The final outcome was brutal in the way real consequences usually are. Not flashy, precise. The underlying traffic charges were sustained. Her license was suspended pending reinstatement compliance. She was fined, ordered to complete a driver responsibility program, and placed under a separate deferred disposition on the false report matter that required community service, reimbursement tied to emergency response costs, and a formal written apology to the court and dispatch unit. The contempt finding remained on the record. Her pending internship with a legal affairs nonprofit disappeared before the month was over. But the damage that hurt most was not financial. It was reputational. It was moral. It was permanent, because now there was a transcript, a dispatch record, emails, a courtroom full of witnesses. She had walked in expecting the room to recognize her last name. Instead, the room recognized the pattern: entitlement under pressure, influence mistaken for immunity, panic the moment a boundary held. If cases like this make you think, let me know in the comments. The most revealing moment in any abuse of power story is rarely the first act. It is the instant the person realizes the shield is gone and everyone can finally see who they are without it. In the end, Ava Mercer did not lose because she got a speeding ticket. People survive tickets every day. She lost because in one impulsive act, she exposed the private belief underneath years of protection that emergency systems, courtrooms, officers, clerks, and rules were all movable pieces if your name was heavy enough. Judge Caprio never had to overpower her. He just stayed still long enough for the truth to arrive. And that is why the scene still lingers. A bright courtroom, a phone glowing in a young woman's hand, a 911 operator asking, "What is the emergency?" And a silence so sharp you can almost hear the future closing around her. Some people walk into court thinking the law is a stage, then they learn it is a mirror.